for this Room for Thought podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Manpreet Dhami-Magne, and I am Executive Vice President for International Strategic Operations at Synergy Global Housing, a leading and multi-award-winning international serviced accommodation provider. Today's podcast, entitled Cost versus Planet, Can We Really Have It All?, is aimed at discussing often tough choices travel buyers and suppliers face when trying to balance cost and sustainability, diving into the real-world implications of prioritizing one over the other, exploring some of the challenges, as well as some of the trade-offs and potential solutions. I'm thrilled to be joined by two of the powerhouse voices of our industry. These two amazing women are not only shaping our industry, but they are also challenging it. So first up, it's with great pleasure that I would like to introduce Kerrie Henshaw-Cox, Director of Global Procurement at AstraZeneca. With over 30 years of experience in industry and a reputation for driving innovation across 90 plus global markets, Kerrie brings with her bold thinking to travel strategy, sustainability, and duty of care. I'm equally pleased to be introducing alongside Kerrie, Shelley Fletcher-Bryant, Vice President of Client Relationship Management at Advito. Shelley's a familiar face in the industry, and she has a unique background spanning both destination marketing, retail, and corporate travel strategy. So without further ado, and tapping into all of the experience of these two wonderful women, let's dive into the key question, which is, can companies really balance the bottom line with what is right for the planet? So I'm going to start with you, Kerrie, if I may. Talk to me a little bit about your role.
So as you said in the introduction, thank you for that. I'm the director of the travel services at AstraZeneca in the procurement organisation. So cost is always a really important part of the role. My job covers the 90 odd countries that you mentioned. We have 60,000 travellers at AstraZeneca. And we have some quite tight targets and budgets to stick to. So it has to be really important when we travel that we are smart, safe and sustainable in the choices that we make. I'm responsible for business travel. I don't cover the meetings and events. I don't cover card or fleet, but we do overlap with meetings and events because we manage the travel for meetings. So basically anyone and everyone traveling on behalf of AstraZeneca, when we pay for that, is part of our responsibility. And I'm lucky to have three amazing regional travel managers based out in Australia, the UK and North America. And I also have a global procurement manager who does all the airline and hotel contracting, with a real strong focus right now on sustainability and those partners, those suppliers with sustainability high on their agenda as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kerrie. Shelley, you're also playing an integral role in championing sustainability. So can you talk to us a little bit about your role?
Of course, yes. And again, thank you for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here having this conversation today. I don't know how long we have for this podcast, but Kerrie and I could talk about this all day long. So we'll try and keep it focused. But yes, my role. So Advito is a business travel consulting firm. We are the consulting arm of BCD Travel, but we also operate independently of BCD. And we have a number of consulting solutions. So the typical travel consulting solutions that you would expect, like air and hotel, looking after sourcing. But in 2019, we launched sustainability consulting, dedicated sustainability practice within Advito. And that was due to increasing demand from clients when we were looking at their air and hotel programs. The conversation around sustainability really started to increase. First of all, how can I measure my emissions? What do I need to do? How do I reduce my emissions? So we had a number of very passionate and very experienced people in the team who then built and created the sustainability practice. And we continue to evolve the sustainability solutions that we offer. So we created a methodology, not because we were bored, but because we felt like the DEFRA methodology, which was standard at that time, wasn't giving enough information to enable real change when it came to switching behaviours. So we built that as a foundational piece, built in consulting, communication to drive behaviour change. And we've really seen that grow since 2019 into a very, very strong practice area. And it continues to evolve because legislation changes, there's different demands, there's different priorities. So the entire team are focused on sustainability solutions. And what we're seeing now is that that's feeding into all of the other core solutions that we offer. So when you're thinking about hotel sourcing, you're thinking about the accommodation sector, you're also now thinking about sustainability. It's not just about what rate can I get. There's a lot of consideration into sustainability and also DE&I components as well. So it's a broad team that kind of cross-cuts all the different solutions that we offer. And we work with some great clients like AstraZeneca to really focus and deliver sustainability when it comes to reducing emissions from business travel.
Fantastic. Thanks, Shelley. Just jumping back to you, Kerrie, can you talk to us from the perspective of a travel manager and speak to us about some of the challenges that you're facing at AstraZeneca?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge we're facing at the moment in managing a travel program is exactly what this podcast is all about. It's that balancing of cost versus emissions. As a business, we have a need to travel. We are a commercial organisation selling our products, making our products, bringing scientists together and developing people around the world. So there is a need to travel. We have budgets, as everybody else does. So managing those costs in the smartest way has always been a challenge of the travel manager. How can we travel when we need to, but do it for the lowest logical amount, which has always been a phrase we've used. But now you layer onto that, and this has been for the past few years, the sustainability angle, doing the right thing by the environment, for the world, but also keeping that within emissions targets that we now also have. So as well as financial targets, we have set emissions targets. So I don't think it's totally new or unusual with other corporate clients. But with us, we really have embraced this. We've really tackled this. A few years ago, we did set emissions targets and divided those targets across the business as you would with a financial budget, and it's managed in that way. So our challenge now as travel managers is to help business leaders and travellers travel not just in a smart way, but in a sustainable way, and help them to make choices that stick within emissions targets. And those targets are cascaded down to the lower levels of the business. So can I be doing things differently? Can I be making smarter choices, more sustainable choices? Do I have the financial budget? Do I actually have the emissions budgets left? So we help the business to stay on track with that. And the other challenge is right now is looking ahead to a growing organisation where we will need to engage and connect people more. Note that I say connect people rather than travel more, because travel isn't always the answer. But knowing what we've achieved in reducing our emissions over the past few years, we can continue to do that and bridge that gap. So the role of the travel manager in an organisation is that advisor, that consultant, that hand-holding partner to the business to say, we recognise you need to travel, you need to connect with people, but let us help you more to achieve it and stay within your financial budgets and your emissions budgets. And it's really interesting that at the end of 2024, towards the end of 24, people and teams were running out of emissions quicker than they were running out of the financials. So we're definitely needed. I think a few years ago, we were knocking on team leaders' doors to say, can we help you? We're now having the business knocking on our doors saying, how can you help us? So there's a real shift.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Certainly from my perspective, post-pandemic, that role of a travel manager has enormously evolved. And just from what you've said there, you're no longer just managing a financial budget, but you're managing an emissions budget. It seems like an absolute minefield to me. But maybe, Shelley, you can shed some light on this from your perspective.
Oh, I echo that completely. The role of a travel manager just continuously expands. It seems like there's no end to the scope of responsibilities that fall upon a travel manager, and it varies all the time. So, Kerrie, you said a great word. You're a consultant to the business almost, in terms of guiding them in how to travel and how to do it safely and sustainably and cost effectively. And when we talk about that balance of kind of cost versus planet or cost versus carbon, I think there's another aspect that weaves into that as well, which is comfort. which is well-being. And these three have to work in synergy together. And it's really challenging, I think, to determine how to make the best choices and what constitutes the best choice. And travel managers are coming to us, just as Kerrie expressed, her internal colleagues are coming to her to ask, what should we do? These are our business objectives. How do we achieve business growth when we also have to focus on reducing our emissions? What are our options? And we all know that travel is an enabler and travel is important and travel is not going to stop or go away, but it's about doing it with a more conscious mindset. So we do a lot of work to understand what is the travel that's happening in the business? Why are people traveling? Do you need 10 people to go to that meeting, or could 2 people go? Do you need to do a one-day trip, or could you either just do that meeting virtually, or could you actually extend the trip and do 2 or 3 meetings at the same time, reducing the need to have future travel? So it's about really taking a step back and having the time to do that. I know isn't easy on the basis that travel managers have 1,000,001 things to do. But that's where working with partners can be really valuable in understanding your data, understanding the trends. But what I think is incredibly valuable that AstraZeneca has that not all businesses have is that there is buy-in on this strategy from the top down, that it really is supported in terms of thinking about the planet and thinking about sustainability, whilst also being focused on business growth. It's not sustainability at the cost of growth. Having this led from the top is one of the foundational pieces for success, I would say, in any travel program.
That makes absolute sense. Again, looking at it from a supplier's perspective, and I work for a wonderful organisation that really does want to do the right thing when it comes to sustainability and balancing that cost versus planet mystery. I just feel that, certainly the journey that we have been on it is very difficult to know where to make the right investments. None of us are making any more money. So, in terms of the accreditations out there, there are, I'd like to say dozens, but there's far more than dozens. Kerrie, Kerrie and/or Shelley, can you talk us through a little bit? Like, what have you done, and what should suppliers, when they're thinking of investing in an accreditation, really be thinking about?
I think to start with, we've focused on the airspace because there are recognised measurements. Shelley referenced the DEFRA calculations earlier. So our emissions targets today are based on air emissions. So we have formulas that we use, which is basically your miles flown by the class of travel. And then we also apply radiative force calculations to ours so that we're reporting as best we can. But this is recognised, this is fairly standard, and you can then compare to others, that measurement. And I think for the air travel, it's something that corporates can do. So we have publicly declared what our commitment to the reduction of emissions will be for air travel only. We can then capture that data, we can report on it to the business, we can created a dashboard so that all areas of the business can see what trips they've booked, how that affects the targets. Today, I could see whether the flight I booked a few weeks ago, what impact that's had, or the flight I booked for a November departure date will have on my total emissions. So it's there. There's more that can be done, don't get me wrong, but it's there. But that's what we are reporting on. For me, there is more that can be done, and this is down to one of our values about doing the right thing. So for the other parts of travel, hotels, apartments, rail, car hire, ground transportation, we aren't formally reporting on the emissions from those areas of the business yet. I do know that some organisations do. My concern is that standardised measurement that would be a recognised way of capturing that and reporting it. So my thinking is to help our travellers to make sustainable and right choices, working with those partners that have made the efforts in their own sustainability agenda, to highlight to our travellers when they're choosing to stay at any accommodation or travel by rail, that they know which ones are the more sustainable. In time, we will be able to reflect that in our reporting. But at the moment, I don't feel the industry is there yet with a standardised way of reporting emissions across accommodation suppliers or ground transportation suppliers. So we are definitely working towards that, but we're not there yet.
Okay. So it's all about making incremental steps in the right direction, starting somewhere.
Absolutely.
And as you say, there's far more established measuring mechanisms when it comes to air travel. But Shelley, can you talk to us a little bit about those other areas and maybe give us some tips around what suppliers can think about in those areas that perhaps aren't as clearly able to measure today?
Yes, and Kerrie's right. The focus on air is consistent across kind of travel reporting. Reason for that being, when it comes to business travel emissions, between 80 and 90% of emissions come from air travel. So in terms of moving levers to reduce emissions, it's where the biggest impact can happen. That being said, accommodation is also really important, and accommodation is somewhat behind air because there isn't standard methodology. I mentioned earlier the methodology that Advito created called Gate 4, and that does account for accommodation as well. So it's air, hotel, accommodation, rail, and car, because we believe that you do need that full picture. What is incredibly complex in the accommodation sector, you mentioned accreditations. The most recent kind of trawl that we did is that there's pushing 250 different accommodation accreditations for eco certificates or eco labels. I mean, it's a minefield, it's ridiculous, it's incredibly challenging for both suppliers and for travel managers to know what's good. So part of the work that we did was to go through and systematically assess all of the criteria for all of these accommodation accreditations, and we ranked them. And I won't go through the full list of 250 accreditations, but some of the best ones that you can sign up to are any accreditations that are linked to the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. They're incredibly robust. LEED is also a really good one, as is Green Key and Nordic Swan in the Nordics regions. Really, really good. There's some other good ones out there as well, but in terms of a snapshot of some of the best eco certifications for accommodation, they're up there. And the reason they're up there is because they're very thorough, they're assessed by third parties, they provide clear guidance on improvements that can be made, and they're an annual assessment. There are others out there. I'm very disappointed to say that you can pay £100 and tick some boxes online and you get your eco certificate. And it's really challenging for accommodation to know what route they should go down. And I think it's also really challenging that when it comes to RFP season, and we're heading into that glorious time now when it comes to hotel and accommodation RFP season, we also, as well as not having consistency in the accreditation, we don't have consistency in what every corporate is asking for from their providers. So when it comes to completing RFPs, we know already it's a painful process, but now with sustainability and layer on top DE&I, there's so many questions and there's so many different questions in terms of what corporates require. And a lot of that also comes down to the audit requirements. So with more legislation coming in, more requirements, the auditing on your emission data is now becoming even more onerous. It's not just a case of putting some figures in front of an auditor and having it included in a report anymore. Part of the work we're doing, a big piece of work we do with any client we work with on producing our emission reporting, is we spend a huge chunk of time talking to the audit team and talking them through the methodology, helping them understand it, explaining it and validating it so that it can be included. And that requirement on audit is going to continue to become a requirement and challenging. And I think we will in time get to a point where there is some consistency, to Kerrie's point, that that's the challenge we have in terms of an agreed global solution. But I don't think it's going to come quickly. I think we're getting there with air now. Obviously, we have DEFRA as the original, if you like. And then there's the travel impact model, Google travel impact model. That is, I think, potentially going to become more of an industry standard, which is very aligned to what we do with Gate 4 calculations. But hotel, accommodation, rail, car, are going to be later additions, I would say, for consistency.
Great. I was just jotting down a few notes as you were speaking there, because I recently attended a conference, and one of the questions that came from the audience around, RFPs and RFIs, and I'd say in recent years, the greater visibility of sustainability, DE&I, etc. One of the questions that came out was, how important is it really when you are assessing other things as part of an RFP, i.e. cost? How really important is that to an organisation? And one of the fellow panelists, who was from a corporate organisation, I think said something very valuable, which is kind of depends on the organisation. Different organisations have a different focus on sustainability, DE&I, etc. But going back to you, Kerrie, Shelley has talked about the ability to pay 100 quid and get a certification. I know that AstraZeneca is incredibly focused on sustainability. It isn't just a tick box exercise for you, but how can other organisations look at selecting providers that are essentially, there's a bit of greenwashing there. Let's just pay this 100 quid, tick a box. What should they be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken previously leading up to this about the reporting. So when you do have to fly, you can get a standard type of reporting, but it means whoever you choose to fly with, you'll get the report from them. We're taking it a step further. And we're working with SBTI, so the Science Based Target Initiative. And basically, we're asking our suppliers to be verified with science-based targets. That becomes our constant to say that's the measurement that we recognise. So it's not £100 that you've paid to buy the certification. It's a standard that we want to use across not just our travel suppliers, but across the suppliers that we work with. And we started this, I'm going to say, 3, maybe 4 years ago now, where we made our partners, our suppliers, aware that this is the direction we were going in, that we were going to be setting targets that you needed to be verified by. And so now we're at the point of, with those key suppliers, to say, are you verified? Do we need to escalate this to help you to become verified, help you to help us? Or do we just need to exit this partnership because you're not on the same sustainability agenda and track that we are, and we want to partner and work with and do business with partners that have the same focus on sustainability that we do. And so that would be, for me, one piece of advice to any corporate, is to find that standard that your suppliers can work with. Find a standard. I'm just giving you the one that we're using, but find a standard that you accept and acknowledge as being approved, to be able to approve your suppliers, the partners that you work with. So that's come from the top. That's not me as a travel manager saying this is the one we're going to recognise. That's what we're doing within the organisation. That's the measurement, the standard that we are going to be working towards.
Yeah, and that makes absolute sense. And you said it a couple of times whilst you've been speaking. All of this has come from the top of your organisation. It's not you as an individual desperately trying to drive this initiative forward, nor is it any member of your team. It really has come from the C-suite and has trickled down to every individual in your organisation. So from that perspective, it's great to see that happen at AstraZeneca. It is not the case in many other organisations. So what do we think perhaps government can do, or our industry associations can do, to help push in the right direction when it comes to taking care of our planet? Shelley, if you could share some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there's a huge role for the industry to play in this, because it's not just about a government setting a framework. There are many governments all around the world with very varying priorities when it comes to where sustainability sits on their governmental agenda, their political agenda. So I think there is a role for government to play in supporting the industry, but my view is that the industry should and could be leading this, defining what it is that we want to report on. How is it that we want to report? What is that balance between cost and sustainability? And that will be at a business by business level, but some form of framework that talks about the benefits and how that's managed is really important. And using case studies from companies like AstraZeneca, where it is led from the top, and you can have both. it's not sustainability at the cost of business growth. You can have both. Taking a sustainable choice isn't always a more expensive choice. You need to have the data to be able to make an informed choice, and you might be surprised. And something we do a lot of is looking at if you are shifting share from one hotel, accommodation, or airline provider to another, that gives you greater negotiating power to get better contracts in place. So there's lots of opportunity at a business level to do that. But I think having the industry, whether that's GBTA as an industry body, really championing standardization and that management of the internal process to get that buy-in, to help educate leaders within businesses that you can have both. It's not one or the other. And then I think government can support that. Where I think we have a challenge today is in the requirements that are being put upon travel managers. When you look at CSRD, you look at the reporting requirements for that sustainability directive all across Europe, and that's causing huge challenges there. I think in Germany, they're looking to have it rolled back and to change it. It's a huge ask, and that's been led not necessarily by industry. So I think industry has a role to play in really championing what we can do, how we can do it, and ultimately starting with the end in mind. What is the goal here? What are we trying to do? This isn't reporting and legislation for the sake of it. There has to be a reason as to why we're taking this seriously. Let's start with that and then work backwards in terms of what do we then need to do to achieve that.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, going back to one of your comments, Shelley, you said, there's so many certifications out there. We've been on this journey ourselves, trying to work out what is the right certification for us, what is meaningful, what is not just greenwashing to tick a box in an RFP, RFI situation. And one of the things that we had an extensive discussion around was offsetting. Because historically, offsetting has been one of the easier, I would say, to take. What, Kerrie, from your perspective at AstraZeneca, what are your thoughts on offsetting? And Shelley, I'll jump back to you for your thoughts on that as well.
I'm going to put this one more as a Kerrie thought rather than a company thought. So I go back to doing the right thing. So we should be reducing the emissions. If we use offsetting as a means to excuse us for doing what we've done, so we've flown, but we can offset it so it's all okay, paying for it after the fact, that to me doesn't feel like the right thing to do. So for me, offsetting comes right at the bottom of the priority list. That we should be tackling our behaviour and reducing the emissions and being smarter in what we do and making more sustainable choices. For example, at AstraZeneca, we've had this campaign, Every Mile Matters, and it focuses on three things, which is to take the train rather than the plane, to reduce one-day trips, so to combine your meetings and don't keep going and don't keep travelling daily, combine them and do 2 or 3 day trips instead, and to choose sustainable partners. We've seen the results of this speak for themselves. Behaviour has changed. We have definitely reduced the number of one-day trips because we've seen our accommodation spend go up as a percentage of total spend. So it means that people are combining trips and staying overnight rather than there and back in a day. The impact of the message of taking the train over the plane has been phenomenal. We've absolutely reduced our emissions because of taking the train. And for any journey that's 4 hours by train, you cannot fly. That we've gone to that extent in Europe. And again, a longer train journey means you need to stay overnight. So combined meetings becomes the sense. But this is tackling it at the front. So reducing emissions, being more sustainable rather than offsetting it after the fact. Because, as I said, it feels like it's an excuse. You can use it as an excuse to travel more. It doesn't matter if I travel more because I can offset it. So I'm a little bit wary of offsetting. That said, when we do travel and we have to travel and we know what our emissions are as an organisation, we offset and we invest in that. We are very careful. We actually have a team that manage offsetting. So let me just put that into perspective a little bit. Business travel emissions account for less than 3% of our total emissions as a company because we're a manufacturing company. Compare that to a consulting company and it's going to be the inverse of that. So we do need to offset all of our emissions, but we do it, if you like, after the fact so that the choices aren't being made based on the fact that you can offset. So that's a perspective.
It makes a lot of sense. Shelley, what about you? How are you advising suppliers when they come to you around this question?
Very similar view to Kerrie in that this plays a role in the strategy, but it is not the strategy. So I would say that there's some really bad offsetting out there, and there's kind of some not so bad offsetting out there. But when you look at the different options for offsetting, there's been so much in the press. If you Google anything about offsetting scandals, you will see endless news reports about companies that have in good faith invested in offsetting schemes, and that money has gone into things that it really shouldn't have been going into. And there have been many issues where, for instance, if you go back, even 10, 15, 20 years, people were planting trees. That was the big thing. Let's offset and plant a tree. It is shocking to see how many of those forests, so those areas where trees have been planted, have been cut down or have been hit by wildfires and have burnt to the ground. So, and that just releases all of that carbon back into the air. So it's about being really considered in what you do choose to invest in. It is a part of the strategy. I agree with Kerrie that there is a need for something, but it is the last piece of the puzzle as far as we're concerned, and the guidance that we give to our clients. And it's to really think and consider about the areas in which you invest. And I think this is another area where the standardization and the accreditation and certificates for offsetting is really quite messy. For instance, one of the best things you can invest in is whale and dolphin conservation, without a shadow of a doubt, because of the amount of carbon that a whale's body absorbs in its lifetime far outweighs any forest reforestation project. But you can't invest in whale and dolphin conservation and get an offsetting certificate for it.
Ever before.
So therefore, it's not necessarily something that people are choosing to invest in.
The marine aspect of this is an
but it
important
would
one
be the
that we should
biggest
make
impact
note
that
of.
you
But I
could
didn't
have.
know though that statistic.
Love whales and dolphins, so that's a great one, Shelley.
But yeah, Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society, just sign up to them. And on a personal level, I do it. When I take a personal trip, I make sure I'm contributing to the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society, because it's a small thing I can do on a personal level. But this whole piece around offsetting, it is an ongoing debate. And it's really important that we have the conversation. But it really worries me when a client comes to us to ask for support and they say, but don't worry, we've got a big offsetting budget. We'll just offset everything. It's not a strategy.
Makes complete sense when you put it like that. By the way, I suspect that you'll be getting a very, very big thank you from the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society as a result of this podcast, for that big shout out on them. So look, guys, you have been absolutely amazing participants in this discussion. I really enjoyed talking to you. Just before we wrap up, because I know we could talk about this for hours and hours, but we sadly do need to wrap up. I'd like to maybe throw a few quick fire questions at you that are more from a personal perspective, and Shelley, you already shared a bit from a personal perspective, but I've got a few questions for you where I would like to get your thoughts. So I'm going to start with you, Shelley. When you travel, are you one for checked luggage or carry on?
Oh, carry on wherever I can. I'm too scared of losing my luggage.
Even if you're going on a very long trip, are you just like a master packer?
I try. If it can't work, then I always take extras with me in hand luggage, which worked well for me recently when I got stranded in Toronto for 4 hours. So I was very pleased to have extra supplies in my carry-on.
Fantastic. Kerrie, what about you? My question for you is around leisure or bleisure. What's your preference?
I'm definitely keep the two separate. That's your question, isn't it? Yeah.
That's basically my question. Yeah, because there has been
keep them separate. I sort of, if you're doing a business trip, stick to business, and for leisure, and I'm a big fan of leisure, then definitely switch off. Try not to take the laptop. Remember that out of office, because downtime is really important for recharging. And I think if you blur the lines, neither business or leisure will benefit.
Completely agree with you. And when we're talking about sustainability of the planet, but I think that need to disconnect from work is necessary for a sustainable workforce. We can't be contactable 24/7 from a work perspective. And I'm totally with you. Go on holiday, let it be a holiday, and then when you have to travel for work, travel for work. Back to you, Shelley. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
I'm 100% a night owl. I am not at my best at the morning. I really feel for my US colleagues. They're always online super early. I'm very happy to stay online late and talk to them. If I had to do calls at 6 a.m., you would get no sense out of me. So definitely a night owl.
I think I might have lost you a little bit there, Shelley. I don't know whether, Kerrie, you can hear me. I'm going to ask you that question as well, because it's something that I'm always really interested in, because I am definitely one side of that very firmly. What are your thoughts?
I'm a Shelley. I'm a night owl, and my boss is actually based in the US, so I can keep going later working with him. One of my team is based in Brisbane, so the early calls with her, whilst fun, because I love her to bits.
An absolute killer.
Yeah, just the early starts for me are tough.
Yeah, no, I think that's a 3 for 3 for all of us. I'm definitely more a night owl than I am a morning person. And, over the years managing a global team, it has been very challenging getting up for those early APAC calls, but I do feel for them. It is possibly, in a global business, the region that is most put upon for out of hours calls. And then the very last question I have, actually, it's not the very last question. I've got one before. Working from home or working from the office? I'm going to put that to you.
For me, working from home. I love the flexibility, and I really value the time I get to focus on, that downtime and well-being, rather than commuting into an office. That being said, my ideal would be hybrid. So a few days in the office, face-to-face with colleagues. You can't beat that interaction. But if I had to choose 100% office or 100% home, I would choose home.
What about you, Kerrie?
Yeah, I work the hybrid model. We have to be in the office for 60% of the time, so basically 3 days a week. But the collaboration and the connecting with people that you wouldn't normally connect with, because you're, working from home for me is this very specific targeted calls and meetings that you have related to the part of the business that you're in. And yet when I go into the office, I'm sitting next to other colleagues in procurement or different parts of the organization, and we make a point when we're in the office to have lunch together. So you catch up on what other people are doing. And I have a brilliant example. I sat at a table recently, where after being frustrated in the morning, I was trying to get a purchase order raised with a part of the organisation, struggled to do it, sat next to a lady at lunchtime, and we were talking about what do you do and where do you work? And she said, oh, I work for this person. And that's the person that was trying to get the PO raised with. So it just shows you that, just mixing and mingling with people that you wouldn't ordinarily do, make connections that you never expected, and usually something good comes out of that. So I like that people in interactivity, like the connecting. Unless I'm doing that call with my Brisbane team member at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then it's going to be a working from home day, because to get into the office after that will be a nightmare. So that hybrid model works well for me.
I don't disagree with either of you. I mean, I love having the flexibility to work from home, but often when I do then go into an office or join meetings, live meetings with colleagues, I remember how much it is I actually quite like people. And how much more you can get done when you're face to face with them, and and things that you perhaps had on your to-do list for weeks and months, and then just bumping into the right person and remembering that wasn't a priority, but now I can tick it off my list. So it's great. So as we do close up this podcast, the last question for both of you is going back to the theme of the podcast: cost or planet. Really, can you share your final thoughts with regards to this, and both from a personal perspective and of course from the perspective of your organisations?
For me, I think that both have a value, have a part to play. I don't think it's necessarily one versus the other. I think in each case you should be considering both cost and sustainability. And that's certainly the case in managing a travel program. Our role here is to provide information, be that consultants, to help the business make smart and sustainable decisions. In their world, in their part of the business, something's going to be more important to them than the other at that time. So I don't think we should be imposing one over the other. I should think we should be giving them the information and the knowledge and the insights to be able to make the right choice that they need to make, cost and sustainable.
Thank you. Shelley.
Well, I think Kerrie's covered it very eloquently there, but I agree. I think cost has to play a role. Of course it does. We're all businesses and there has to be a growth element, and cost continues to be a key factor. As I said earlier, it doesn't always mean that sustainability costs more than doing something else. So I agree, it can be both. You can balance both. The best way to do it is to have visibility and an understanding of what your options are, and then to be effectively tracking it. And I think having both a fiscal budget and a carbon budget is a great way of getting the balance right.
Thank you. Thank you both for your time. Thank you both for sharing all of your insights and your experience. It's been wonderful chatting to you both. Just for the audience out there, thank you for listening to Room for Thought. And if you liked, please do share and subscribe. Thanks very much.